We want our raw thoughts.
I don't think the people want my raw thoughts. Is there any of these names that really jump out at you, other than apparently raw thoughts? We've talked about palace lizards, although I want to talk about that one in a little bit more depth.
Yeah.
Is there like a top one or two on this list of 25 that you just somehow came up with when we were texting?
The top one would be something to do with the palace lizards. I also like bias towards action.
Mm-hmm.
Killing dragons looks cool. That one that you added. I'm assuming that's one you added in there and not a topic?
No, it's actually a topic,
okay.
But that I'm totally fine with that being a name. Killing dragons has specifically to do with the palace lizard's name. In fables that are part of our mythology, stories that are part of our mythology, lizards are good or evil.
And I'm more familiar with the evil ones in mythology.
Yeah, I am too. And so I was thinking, palace lizards, I think that we would get some kind of, I think it wouldn't be projecting, although I like the word picture, and especially the reference to Psalms. Is it Psalms? Proverbs. I was thinking Proverbs and I was like, no, I remembered wrong. Anyway, whatever. I think that because of our culture, I think it would just conjure, like, and I were talking, and she was like, I don't know any Disney lizards that are good. And then I was thinking, like, what's the, like, consummate hero story? And it's damsel in distress, Prince Charming, kills the dragon, saves the princess.
Right.
That's kind of the deal. Lizards in the palace. And then I was thinking, we might get a lot of, like, conspiracy theory guys and gals, like, lizards are ruling the world, because that was a thing in
I have heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the 90s, but I don't know when it was.
Or we get people who are really familiar with the Book of Proverbs.
I think that would be a real small group of people.
You only need 1,000.
I don't think it's 1,000.
You really don't think there are 1,000 people and they'll read the Book of Proverbs and know the Book of Proverbs well?
I don't think that there are.
That's a very disappointing thought.
Okay. Yeah, no, if you go there with that thought, sure, that's disappointing. But I think that you're not filtering correctly when you say that. I think it's 1,000 people who know Proverbs well, who are looking for a new podcast that are related to some of the people that we know. Who, it's just like, that are English speaking, right? They probably are going to be English speaking. I think that, there's just like a lot of filters that go down pretty quick and can get that number smaller than 1,000,
So then we go to killing the palace lizards.
Yeah, killing lizards. That's it. We got it. Killing palace lizards. Killing dragons as a name for a podcast, that's not something I thought of. So a lot of these I'm noticing kind of a type there's kind of two types here. You've got things that are very productivity focused and then word pictures from the Bible or phrases from the Bible.
Yep, that was basically, well, except for
those were your sources.
Colons of or Two Happy Hobbits.
Two Happy Hobbits. Is that addenda to the Bible?
That's actually comes from a quote from Andy Wilson that he gave at a talk I was listening to, where he was talking about the problem of evil and describing how if you had no evil in the Lord of the Rings, you just have happy hobbits out eating and smoking, which would be a really great life for them, but it'd be a very boring story. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure how that fits into this idea of what we want to cover in the podcast. I guess the idea of just being able to hang out for an hour and talk stuff we've been thinking about, it would be something where you wouldn't be taking it too seriously. But that may not be the direction we want to go.
Well, let me just ask, like, how... A concern I have is, like, I don't particularly want to add another, like, serious work commitment in my life.
Right.
I'm constantly trying to improve my, like, work-life habits. Mm-hmm. And, adding something where you and I are discussing on a monthly or, every other week or whatever it ends up being basis where we're talking fairly seriously. I don't mind talking seriously, obviously, but I don't know, the happy habits is starting to grow on me. The, conversations that oscillate between joking conversations where I guess it probably is not a fantastic place to talk about the idiosyncrasies of our close friends, although maybe it's fine for that, to, like deep currents of theology and other stuff.
Right.
But I don't, or the habits that we're trying to grow in ourselves and that we see in others, and whatever it is. If we have something that is really like geared hard towards productivity or theology, or one facet of our friendship, then when we have stuff that we want to talk about that isn't related to that specifically, it just will maybe feel like it doesn't fit. But it's not a hill I'm going to, camp out on and plant my flag in. If you one of these other ones that you're really interested in.
Yeah, we'll just have to have a phone call outside of this.
Geez, Kyle, I don't know how much time you think I have for you.
Thanks.
No. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Well, I mean, with that, is there any of these that I'm liking the Happy Hobbits? It doesn't even need to be two Happy Hobbits. We can add Hobbits.
That's a very good point. Just Happy Hobbits.
Happy Hobbits, and I've read The Hobbit. I haven't read the rest of them though.
Seriously?
Yeah. Apologize for the inconvenience.
And you just had 2 weeks off.
I didn't have 2 weeks off, bud. I had 6.
You said 6 weeks off.
I don't know if off is the right word.
It's probably not the
right
word.
I was not gainfully employed for 6 weeks because of the coronavirus. Yeah, it was a break. You're right. I did get a lot of stuff done, but reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy was not one of the things I did with my time off.
Oh man, I don't think we can be on a podcast together until you read those books.
Okay, well, this isn't getting published for a while, so I've got time. Item 1, check. Yeah?
Happy Hobbits it is.
I mean,
because it's not
we
like,
can discuss
the Hobbits do have serious conversations too.
They do.
It's more of...
I've seen the movies. Does that count? Tyler was offended when I said that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Especially the Hobbit.
Well, no, those don't.
The Lord
count.
of the Rings
those
movies
are a bunch of...
they were decent. You still got the gist of the
actual story.
Yes, but so much of the Hobbit, it's driven by the character, driven by Boromir's insecurity, Faramir's similar insecurity, but the nobility that still exists in him that allows him to overcome that insecurity that haunts Boromir and their dad Denethor, and the true nobility. It's conflicts between nobility and pure evil, and then with the Hobbits and Gollum, it's the juxtaposition of the strength of something that is very small and overlooked in both cases, because I mean Gollum was Hobbit-like, and the way that Gollum holds on, and that Frodo goes from having totally despising him, which you get in the movie, to understanding Gollum, and there's a point in the book where Sam's looking at Frodo and Gollum, and he sees the similarity, and you don't see that in the movie as starkly as you do in the book. Both Sam and Frodo are better characters in the book than they are in the movie.
That's almost always the case, because even, you've got a couple different points of view that you can write from, but it's almost never done well that a book would be as good a movie, because you don't typically have the
Sorry,
thought.
I'm saying that Frodo and Sam are both morally better characters.
Oh, I see.
They're stronger characters in the books than they are in the movies, especially Frodo. Sam, they do get across some of that strength and loyalty, but Frodo comes off kind of like a bit of a dirtbag at times.
Yeah, do you think that's because we can see more of the battles that he fights in the books? That would be my guess, at least, having not read them.
I think Tolkien gave him a greater... Again, I come back to the word nobility in the book. I think Jackson saw the need in the movies to create that tension between Frodo and Sam, whereas Tolkien saw them working together far more closely. Sorry, this is making me kind of spin off onto The Last Dance and Michael Jordan, but it reminds me of... So the latest episode that was published of The Last Dance went into Jordan's gambling a little bit, and it was interesting to hear Michael's perspective on it, because he basically said, if I had a gambling problem, people would have noticed, because I would have been needing to sell my house and stuff. The issue was he was gambling with large amounts of money in Atlantic City and on the golf course, but they were large amounts of money relative to your average American. To him, they were not large amounts of money. So he could... So
not even particularly risky?
Right. He could lose 10, 50 grand in a golf game, but because of his contracts with the Bulls and Nike and McDonald's and the list goes on. That was like
He didn't care.
us betting $10. But then people...
I cannot fathom being so rich that $50,000 is the same as $10. Although maybe Bill Gates feels that way, or somebody who, or Michael Jordan apparently.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what the documentary suggests?
That's what Michael says in the document.
Yeah, but Michael also could have a somewhat warped view of reality.
But the other thing is he's worth $2 billion or something at this point.
There's a lot of billion. I mean, well, it's not that many billion, but it's
a lot of million.
It's a lot of million.
2,000 million.
2,000 million. Okay. Did I cut you off there, or is there more you want to say about that?
It was just, they talked about how we as a culture enjoy this. It's the Batman thing where you build someone up as a hero until you cut them down as the villain. And so I wonder if Jackson kind of was playing with that with Frodo's character, where he's the good guy, right, but who is charged with the quest, but he's also this tragic character who the book has a tragedy where the tragedy is that he will not be able to live in the world he saves.
Well, don't ruin it for me.
Whereas you see that in the movie too, but it's not as stark. In the movie,
I didn't get that impression from the movie that I recall, and I've seen him at least twice.
Okay, but
I don't recall that as an impression.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think bothers people when they see the movie and compare it to the book or what's displayed as happening with Frodo in the movie is just not close to the full agony that he goes through in the book, which makes him that much grander a character in the actual story, as opposed to this sort of pawn that is impacted. He is a true tragic hero.
That's interesting. So if we're going to go back to that kind of hero story, the typical hero story, even though obviously the details are changed somewhat, it's damsel in distress, hero tries to save the damsel, and then dies, or potentially dies in the process.
Right. It's the messianic story.
Yeah, which we see in so many different stories, and is by far the most compelling. Like, people just never seem to get tired of that, unless you're avant-garde.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what that means.
Well,
I've heard it's French for bad art, but I don't think that's probably what it means.
I think it's like advanced guard or cutting edge, but I think what's going on there is you have, and this kind of goes back to Francis Schaeffer's books on art and postmodernism. How should we then live? And in that he details the history of art and makes a case that in order to reflect the way that culture has broken its connection to absolute truth that comes through Christianity, it necessarily needs to create art that doesn't follow the story that we innately desire.
Mm-hmm. Who did you say wrote that?
That was Francis Schaeffer.
I liked how I spelled it just fine.
There may be another
when was that written?
In there too, but it was written in the mid 20th century, like the 60s, 70s, something like that.
Pretty sure it would be Schaffer if there was another F in there.
That's true. But he and his wife founded a kind of commune of sorts. I hate to use that word, but what it was must have been during the
A compound?
Sort of. It was in the Alps, a little French town called Le Brie, and the idea was you had all these college kids who were searching for meaning. I mean, that's at the time when Steve Jobs went to India, right, and had his experience. Yeah. But some college kids would come to Le Brie and they'd work in the gardens, and that's how they paid their way, basically. And Schaeffer and his wife and some other Christians there would teach them about Christianity. And I mean, a lot of them were Christians, I think, coming in. They just wanted to understand how to have an impact on the world in a similar way. Beatles and Jobs were having an impact or going to have an impact. And they did that in the context of this Christian community there. Yeah,
so you don't like the word commune, so I'm assuming because you called them Christians that they were not a cult.
Right.
It's kind of interesting. I told you that we had watched, well, actually, showed me, I hadn't seen it, the Plandemic video, right?
Oh boy.
Which, if you don't want to talk about it, we just cut it and we'd be done right now.
No, let's. I haven't watched it at all. I think it is worth talking about stuff like this, just given how big of an impact coronavirus is having on our country and our culture right now. So it is a very
and the world.
And the world. But
Yeah.
particularly I do want to focus on America, because the rest of the world seems to understand that we need to lock down.
Sure. And I think that because a lot of Americans live in cities, I do think a lot of the Americans understand that I don't see, I mean, if we're going to get political here for, just a
Go
moment.
for it.
Blue, it seems like a lot of the dissent is coming from the right.
Yes.
And not from the left. And the cities are red and,
No, cities are blue.
No, cities are blue. Colorblind. Not really, just kidding. Cities are blue and everywhere else is fairly red. Except for, what's that? There's, a city in Texas that Tim Ferriss is in. And he's like, it's
very blue.
Blue and a sea of red. But that's, every, except for Seattle and Portland, the Portland area, Washington is completely red. Except for Portland and probably Salem, Oregon is completely red. All of Southern California is blue, and the north is mostly red. So you've got that divide there. But
my only quibble with that is California, the coast is blue and the inland is red.
Yeah? Okay. I trust you. In any case, this was not where I was going to go with this.
This is fascinating, though. I'm very curious where you're going to go with this.
Yeah, no, it was basically just that a little bit more backstory. Yeah. Not all of it, but just I've started reading a book by Greg Koukl called Tactics. I'm not very far into it. Have you ever read it?
Is that on evangelism?
He might say that it is. It sounds like from the first 2 chapters of the book that it is on disagreeing in a winsome way. He talks about, instead of trying to present the gospel to somebody you just meet, putting a rock in their shoe to help them, it's basically something that that's gonna bug them, a problem with the way that they think that will hopefully, some
it's evangelism through Christian.
But it's some water, some plant, and then others harvest. And he would say that the tactics that he's talking about are more the water and the planting stage. And maybe there's some harvesting, but that's the easy work almost, is what he said. The people who the Lord has prepared for that, he has done all of that work. Basically, so my wife is talking with a friend of hers about this I'm not quite sure what video. We'll just call it a video. No judgment there. About some of the problems with it. We watched it together and talked about it. And Kyle, you said you hadn't watched all of it?
I have watched 0 of it.
You've watched 0 of it. Well, I hate to poison your mind with a predisposition against it, but
I think I'm already poisoned.
Some of the questions that she asked me were what were problems that you found with it, right off the bat. To give you an idea, it's about a PhD doctor of some kind who was involved with research related to HIV and basically stole, she was at some point asked to leave she was fired, and then she stole some documents and went to jail. The video where she's being interviewed by somebody basically says that she was dragged out of her house and her husband was questioned strongly by the FBI for several days, and that Anthony Fauci
this is HIV
wasn't
back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Correct. Yep. And that she had a gag order, and that it was all these things, and it basically, one, the video doesn't use hardly any. I don't think it uses any dates for the claims that they're making. One of the reasons that makes it feel somewhat compelling is that it is a 25-minute video. So if you decide to watch it, strap in. It makes so many claims and no evidence. Almost. I don't think that they're this is our claim and here is some evidence that you can look at that supports this. Right. It's just claim after claim after claim after claim after claim for 25 minutes, and it's it keeps getting taken down off of YouTube. And the author wants to say the reason that it keeps getting taken down is because the people the people who are in control don't want this information out. One, there's claims with no backup. 2, they use copyrighted material with no mention of that. And so and the reason that I know that it has copyrighted material is because I've seen some of the other videos that it has, and it makes no mention of them. It just basically says, like, we came up with this. They're splicing other things into it that, one, is even misconstruing the other, like, where the other video, like the original
Yeah.
videos. They're taking it totally out of context. And anyway, so it's just like riddled with stuff.
Yeah.
And the idea that we have, I don't know, just like there's certain authority or certain talking with these people who have these kind of alternative views or that views that are different than ours. Like, how do you do that in a winning way? How do you talk with somebody who thinks that the reason that you think the things that you believe are because you're a sheep?
Right.
Like, that's difficult when somebody thinks that you are completely deceived and actually they are. Or
This
like
is actually something I've been thinking about from the standpoint of I've been asking myself the question, why have those conversations?
yeah,
In what circumstances are those conversations something worth fighting
helpful
for?
basically. Yeah, and I would say that the reason that they are helpful. So let's say that you and I are in a group of 10 people
Yeah.
and one person has these views that are different than the other
Right.
9, right? And you and I are in this group, and so outside of that main group, we discuss
Right.
it, and we say, "Man, isn't it silly that this person thinks this?" Well, because we're not talking with that person because we think, well, maybe it's a hopeless cause or there's no help. That person thinks A, these people agree with me, or B, they have, even if they disagree with me, they have nothing to back it up with, and then they feel kind of justified. And if one of us says, hey, I think you might be wrong, or I don't understand why you think that, would you explain it to
Uh,
me? And then you kind of open up that
which is a
conversation.
much better way to go about it, I think. And then ideally, if you can communicate the arguments for that position better than they can, at least conceptually, it seems like that would be a beneficial way to go about that. The question I have
Yeah,
is
would you walk me through what you just said with some examples? I'm sure that I do this as well, but I just want to understand what you're saying. So, or I can try to
so the
restate
first
it.
thing I talked about was, so you had two ways of approaching a person. The one is to say I don't think you're right here. The other way is to say, can you explain to me why you think this? So if I think that good business idea is to go buy a bunch of widgets over in one place and then resell them in another place, and I think that it's such a good idea that I'm going to go mortgage my house in order to go do it. And then
Yeah, that's a good
then
idea.
you come up to me. You can do two things. You can say, Kyle, I think that's a really dumb idea, and here's why. And then I get all defensive because I go, Daniel just doesn't see the cool. He just doesn't have the vision that I have, so he can't see the great wealth that will come by mortgaging my house, buying all these trinkets, and reselling them. Or you could come up to me and say, Kyle, can you walk me through your thought process for why this is such a great idea? And then you can lend support for things that are true, like if there may be a legitimate difference in the value of the trinkets in one area versus another area, and so transferring them may make sense. But then you can ask questions like, so what is the risk that the relative values will change in the midst of this transaction, and what ramifications does that have for the house you have now mortgaged? So
Sure.
you get me. It's like what you're talking about with tactics, where you get me thinking about, okay, what should I be analyzing? What have I missed here? And it's
Yeah.
me breaking down my own identity instead of someone else trying to shape my identity for me.
Yeah, well, and in addition, I'm not passing judgment on you.
For thinking that.
I'm not, yeah, for thinking that. And, like, in this group of 10, let's say there's genuine care. And in this, kind of interaction you're talking about, there's genuine care. Actually, like, I want to know what you're
Right.
thinking. I don't just, there is kind of this implied care that if I didn't care. I wouldn't say anything to you about your dumb idea.
Yeah, because if I lose my house, maybe you can get a good deal on it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let me know when you decide on that, and then I'll, get the cash ready. Just kidding. There's like a couple different kind of things working together as far as the tactics go, but as soon as you have somebody, either the person with the idea that you disagree with, if they get upset, then you can't change their mind. You can't, or they are unwilling to change their mind. It's not even, because really, you can't change somebody else's mind. You can reasonably present facts and arguments and be persuasive and caring, but they're the ones who change their mind. Or if you get defensive, then you're not going to present, even if you're saying things that are correct, you're not going to be saying them in a way where they can listen. And so if either person gets upset or defensive or mad, you've lost.
And that's where it gets to kind of the third concept, where you present the argument better than the other person. So you come up to me and say, Kyle, here are the ways you can make money by reselling these widgets. These are all of things that the benefits of buying the widgets here and selling them there. This is why the place you've picked to sell them is the best possible place. This is why the place you've picked to buy them is the best possible place. This is why your house is the best place to get that money. And then you start walking through, and here are the risks associated with the place you're buying them, and here are the risks associated with the place you're selling them, and here are the risks associated with taking money out of your house. And if you're willing to take those risks, then more power to you. But I just want you to understand that these are the risks with the positions you're taking here. And so then it's like you've made it abundantly clear that you're on my side. You're trying to get me the best deal possible. You see exactly what I see. In fact, you see more than I see, and I should be able to realize that. Now the question then comes back to, how far do you push it? How far do you keep pushing with someone before you say, you know what, I have limited time, and I can either take someone from, I'm uniquely suited to influencing people in these areas and these spheres of influence, and I can, the spheres of influence is a concept I really like, because you have your immediate family is an area of tremendous responsibility.
Sure.
You go to church, and there's it's not as immediate as your family, but it's still pretty, especially if you're someone in church leadership, there is a definite amplified level of responsibility there. But even if you're a lay person who's in the pew every Sunday, you still have a responsibility to the other members of your local church. And then you kind of go outside of that, and that's where I think it gets more gray as to how steep the grade is for the amount of work you should do to protect someone from hurting themselves.
I think for the most part, the people who you feel like you ought to care for, a handful of significant relationships in my life, I would say, with, there's obviously my wife, right, number one. And then there's family. But even that, my brother-in-law and I have different views on certain things. So it'd be brother. And when he brings stuff up, I'm definitely happy to dialogue with him, but I don't seek to go out and change his mind on certain things. Right. Now, my sister's husband, who I'm much closer with, I would probably go more out of my way to change his mind on certain things. If I saw that it was as big a deal as some of the disagreements that I have in other areas, sure. I don't know. I think there's a certain gut check, but I am, I'm only going to make those. I'm only going to have those difficult conversations that make sense to have difficult conversations with. But if somebody is in front of me saying something that's off base, way off base, I'm at least going to ask them questions. I'm not going to try to change their mind, probably. Not right there, not go through the whole thing. But I am going to say, why do you think that? And this is, regardless of whether... Okay, so everybody thinks they're right most of the time. And not I'm willing to die on this hill kind of right, but just generally, if you haven't checked your assumptions for certain things, you're just kind of, without really thinking hard about it, you don't intentionally have thoughts. You're yeah, that's probably wrong. I'm gonna ask questions, and hopefully some of those will result later for other people in their life. But if nobody's willing to talk to somebody who is, I don't want to say crazy, but just like who basically has opinions that are unfounded, then they're never going to change their mind. Like, that's kind of how echo chambers start,
Right.
is because nobody, at least I would think, I'm not 100% sure, but just that you have these areas that are difficult, and you know, there's like always jokes made around Thanksgiving, like about Thanksgiving, like talking with your relatives who you never talk with, and they all think crazy things. But if you're not willing to talk with somebody about what they think that's wrong, or even hear why they think it, like, I don't know, that just shows a certain level of indifference, which is, I would say, you know, almost worse than hate, almost worse than, like, you have hate and love are kind of on the same side of the ledger, and indifference is on the other. Like, you've got to, you know, at least I think it's probably easier to love somebody who you used to hate than it is to love somebody who you used to care nothing about. Like, there's almost more work to do there.
That's a huge predicament, I think, for us living in this area with so many people who are in the homeless or vagrant population, is recognizing that these are people, these are human beings made in the image of God. When we come across them, daily lives, sometimes we aren't supposed to be indifferent. We also need to be careful about not. Well, I would go so far as to say is giving someone cash when they first ask for it is being indifferent, because it's enabling. If you give someone money without truly understanding what their need is, it's enabling. You're at serious risk of enabling a behavior that is not beneficial to that person, and you're just doing it in order to get them out of your way.
Is that the only reason why you would do it?
Without understanding the backstory. I can't, for me personally, I can't think of a reason why. I guess it could be out of pity, but sure. it's a sentimental pity. It's not a rational pity.
Yeah, I've had a handful of times. I mean, basically, like, the last handful of times, which hasn't been that often, somebody's asked for money. It's like, well, what do you need? What do you need the money for? And if they need it for gas, I'm like, all right, well, let's go fill your gas tank up. And twice in a row, I had somebody just drive off. Like, and I'm like, I was really confused. They were like, I was willing to fill their whole, like, they said they were on. And it didn't even occur to me why they would have driven off.
Yep.
Like, sometimes it took like days for me to realize, like, oh, they wanted the money for something else. And and then there was one guy who took it. And, you know, like, it's between him and the Lord whether that's what it was for, why he didn't have the gas, or, you know, if he actually lost his wallet, or you know, whatever it was. So, I don't think that's any great accomplishment, but it seems like one step up from cash, because, you know, I know that they're using it for gas, or I know that they're using it for food, or I know that they're using it for water or whatever, because I've purchased the thing for them.
Yeah, that's kind of a process that we have with our church being where it is. Well, we don't hand out cash. We'll buy people bus tickets. We'll buy people food, buy people clothes. On some occasions, we've put people up in a hotel room once we had the time to really understand their situation and see that it warranted it. But under no circumstances do we just give someone cash, because it is so easy to go over to the liquor store and get your fix, or what to do with it,
or whatever it is. Yeah, that makes sense. And you guys are you guys in downtown?
No, we're in Fremont.
Okay.
So Fremont and 82nd.
Yeah, so I realized, so we've been talking for, my clock says 50 minutes. We didn't really introduce ourselves.
Well, I thought that was going to be in the intro, that we were going to record separately. You want to record it separately? I mean, we could introduce ourselves. We could introduce ourselves by saying goodbye.
All right, we can do that. Anything else that you see on our little itinerary, whatever you want to call it?
We didn't talk about Boredom to Excellence, what you build, killing dragons. The what can you build? That's why I'm glad we're doing this right now, because it takes in a couple of the concepts from that Choose FI Rebel Entrepreneur podcast, which are actually building something, actually doing something, creating instead of consuming. And then the other thing is the concept of accountability, and having two people working together to create sort of mini tribe. The standard is that we are biased towards action. We produce instead of consume. Seek to make the world a better place with what we're producing.
Yeah. Yeah, I as far as like the what you can build, is that that's the same idea of bias towards action, like what we can do. What can we do now? Like what's the minimum viable, is it minimum viable product? Minimum viable
the MVP,
product?
the minimum viable product.
Yeah, like how can we just get it out the door?
Get it out the door, a few people interested in it, get feedback. That was one of the points is with a podcast or with a blog, when you're first starting out, you can cater exactly to your audience. You can fill the need that they need, because if you're a Joe Rogan, you can't cater to all 3 bazillion listeners because there are just too many. You can't have that personal relationship. Sure. Whereas when you're first starting out, that's when you get to enjoy having that higher level.
So basically, what do our wives want, and maybe the Davids, and maybe our moms? Is that kind of our first 6, you think, listeners?
I think my dad would listen to this.
Okay, 7. Perfect.
He goes out and hikes the driveway to get ready for hunting season, so.
Oh, how long is your parents' driveway?
It's a third of a mile. It's a third of a mile and 200 feet, some feet.
It doesn't seem like a very long hike.
Well, he does it multiple times for an hour.
Oh, yeah, okay. There you go. Okay.
With a pack with weight.
Pack with weight. There you go. Yeah, I was doing that. I was trying to get ready for hiking last spring.
Yeah.
I don't know how much, and I don't know when things are going to be open.
I think, but
I thought they still had a number of things closed down.
They kept everything around Oregon closed down because they didn't want people from Portland coming over to Washington to hike. But everything north, I think, is open as far as hiking and stuff goes.
So because we basically live in Portland, then a lot of things here are still closed. Is Gifford Pinchot?
I heard that it still was closed, but also that is national forest. And what I heard is that state land was opening up, federal land was not. So that's why that was closed. Because... Yeah, as far as like camping and stuff, going up to Suisun Creek in that area would be sweet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not that I would be doing that right now or anything like that, or doing that with a group of people or anything, but...
Oh, absolutely not. I think that, it's supposed to be 80 for the next 2 days, and then it's supposed to rain for 10 days.
Great camping weather.
I think. Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. I think I might go to Frenchman's Bar, but I think it's going to be pretty packed.
I forgot, you guys like to drink.
Frenchman's Bar is a park.
I know.
Oh, it's a good one, Kyle.
Thank you.
I'm going to remember that for later.
I never go to Frenchman's Bar.
It's because you have to bring...
The girls.
Your 2 little girls. I'm a bad friend. You have to tell me their names again. I could look it up. Oh, sorry. Do we want to not say people's names?
Yeah, I think that's probably wise. I just...
Okay.
I don't know. So this actually comes from Seth Godin. He's very careful about keeping at least his entire family, but especially his children, out of his professional life. And I think that's a really good... practice.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You're gonna have to figure out how to bleep out your son's name. Then we can bleep out all the names.
Remember, I told you I already know how to bleep stuff out because of my earlier rap career.
Oh, I was in a rap career. You're doing stuff for your church. And what? Yeah. Did you actually use the bleep?
Yeah. There are a couple different tools you can use with different. No, I didn't. I didn't use bleep. No, I just basically removed the sound from that spot in the track and damped it down, and then you put a...
I trust that you know what you're doing, and I don't care too much about how the sausage is made.
You put a filter on it.
Yeah, and you can cut out all of the ums that we do. I don't know how much work that's going to be. I have no idea how much work this is going to be.
That's what's going to make this fun.
Yeah, well, you can do a part, and then I can do a part, and together we'll make it happen.
Sounds good. Kind of got distracted.
Yep, you go.
What we're talking about.
Frenchman's Bar, you were trying to make a joke about how me and my wife drink too much. Was that it?
Well, it's not a joke. It's very serious, but...
Oh my goodness, Kyle.
So that's
was that what you wanted to discuss?
No, it was something about what can you build, and then we got distracted from that.
No, I think we finished that part.
Oh, we were talking about who would listen to this.
Yeah, and I feel we figured out 7, maybe 8. But if it doesn't grow beyond that, then at least those 7 or 8 people will be really entertained.
My blog,
or at least marginally entertained.
My blog, Design for Strength, has 10 subscribers, so that should tell you something.
Yeah, that 10 people are interested in being designed for strength.
I think one of them is probably one of my email accounts, though.
9 people are interested, besides you, in Design for Strength. Yeah. Well, how are your page views this week?
They weren't super high. I
just
check when I post. Oh, I was just saying I have a bunch of people that I think we could bring on as guests. Experts in various fields. So if we want
You have a bunch? How many experts do you know? I know 0 experts.
I know. Well, I mean, one of the guys is
Is it your workout buddy?
No, I mean.
He seems like he would be
be
interesting.
fascinating.
We could talk about Plandemic.
I don't know if he's seen that. He probably hasn't seen that.
You sent it to him. Anyway. Well,
there would be far more
gonna
interesting
actually
things to talk to him about.
Okay.
Far more relevant, and yeah, I'll stop. No, I know a few people just through academia and then through church who are just have very interesting, and then there are like knock-on people who are further afield, but would be fun to talk to about.
What about Nate Wilson? You think you get him on?
I mean, Nate, I don't know how his health is right now, because ever since he had that brain tumor, he hasn't really been able to sleep much.
Oh, well,
but
that would be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if we get this to the big enough point, I'd be willing to ask him.
Okay.
For sure. And there are a bunch of other people in the mosque community who are doing interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to see something really fun?
Yeah.
You should go look up the, just like part of an episode of Cross Politic.
Cross Politic? That does not sound like my
Or you could look up the Patriarchy podcast.
Is Cross Politic where like you have 4 talking heads and they're just yelling at each other? That's a different one.
There are 3 talking heads, one of whom is a pastor of one of the pastors at Christ Church, and I don't think they yell at each other, but I also haven't listened to.
Is it a podcast then? Okay. Well, maybe I'll take a listen. Although I've a handful of podcasts this week have come on my radar, and then I give them a listen and then delete them. So there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't particularly helpful. You've only got so much time, and even now with a longer commute, I still only have so much time. I tried doing some dictating while I was driving up there. I was just gonna use the like Apple whatever it is, and that did not work the way that I had hoped.
Okay.
So we'll see if we can find something else that works a little bit better.
I'll talk to my brother and see if he can improve some stuff on Amazon's.
Yeah, you do that. You let me know how that works out. Does he actually work on that project?
Ostensibly. I also know another guy who may or may not work on that project. But he works on
I'm sure you do.
Actually, no, you know him too.
Mm-hmm.
Mr.
We'll have to
Mr.
talk
offline.
Oh.
Yes.
No, I don't know who you're thinking of. We'll just have to talk offline. Isn't it true that all engineers kind of know each other? They're like, yeah.
We'll have to talk offline.
Oh, okay.
Well.
Who are you? Why are you doing this? Why should we listen to you?
Okay. My name is Kyle Morse. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade who enjoys ideating and thinking about topics.
What does ideating mean?
Ideating is the process of coming up with ideas.
Okay.
Basically, it's a fancy word for thinking about new things. Yeah, I enjoy thinking about new things, especially when it comes to productivity and business development and literature. So if you're interested in any of those things, this would be an excellent place for you. Daniel.
Yeah, so my name is Daniel Hayward. I am a project engineer. It's actually my official title, but it's basically a step or 2 below being a project manager in construction. Something Kyle didn't say is that at least currently we are both in the Portland metro area. We're on the West Coast.
Best Coast.
Yeah, West Coast, Best Coast. Look, you did a rhyme. And the reason that you guys should listen, man. I mean, yeah, Kyle and I have been friends for a couple years now anyway, and ideating with Kyle has always been a pleasure. And so I thought we'd give this a go. Basically, I mean, Kyle kind of just talked through some of the... I don't know why now I'm talking to a listener as opposed to talking to you, Kyle. I think you did that, and now I got all confused.
That's okay.
But basically, I enjoy talking with you about different ideas and then sharpening those ideas with questions. And man, you are like... This is as honest a compliment as I've ever given anybody. Like, the way that you think... Like, I just really enjoy when I ask you questions how thoughtful you are about them. And that's kind of what I think is going to give this legs. And in addition to that, like I'm just here to have a good time.